Welcome to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. This episode is part of our Indies Introduced series, where we spotlight debut authors handpicked by booksellers from around the country. In each episode, a bookseller from the Indies Introduced panel will interview the author of a debut title featured in our program.
Hi, my name is Allie Cesmat. I am the children's buyer for Changing Hands Bookstore in Phoenix, Arizona. And I'm so excited today to get to talk to Morgan Watchorn for her new book, Fire to the Stars. Morgan J. Watchorn writes stories that feature unapologetic girls at the heart of cataclysms, either fighting or causing them. A Southern California native, she graduated magna cum laude from the University of California, Irvine with a bachelor's degree in Japanese language and literature. Her manga and novel translations can be found in most major bookstores. When she's not writing, she's usually at the barn with her spoiled horses. Fire to the Stars is her debut novel. Hey, Morgan, thanks for joining me today.
Hello, thank you for having me and for choosing Fire to the Stars.
Yeah, of course. The Indies Introduced panel is one of my favorite things I've done as a bookseller, and getting to read these debuts just really shined a new light to the side of bookselling that I hadn't done before. And our panel loved Fire to the Stars because it's not your average YA fantasy that's in the mix right now. And to me, like from the first chapter, it just like really jumped out that this was gonna be a contender. And I'm
Oh,
so
thank
glad
you.
it made our final list. Yeah, of course. Tell me a little bit about the book. Like just give our listeners kind of a little synopsis.
Sure. I would say that I guess I'll give you my one-liner. It is about a con artist who hires a disgraced dragon slayer to pursue a false lead, but spoiler alert, she's the dragon.
Oh, love it. I hadn't heard that like one-liner, and if I would have known going into this, that's the other thing is because the panel only gets, manuscripts. There isn't a lot of that marketing built yet, so we
That's
like to,
actually
as we're
not
reading it.
that's actually not on any of the material. I came up with that like way too late in the process.
Oh my
I don't
gosh,
know
I need
why.
you to call everybody and have a reprint immediately.
Oh my gosh, I that makes me think I should email my team after this. Just be like, hey, by the
It
way,
just
I
is,
came up with this thing that's surprisingly effective.
it is. It really is. The spoiler alert, she's the dragon, I think really sold it for me.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, of course. As I mentioned, for me, this is a YA fantasy. I know the industry right now, romantasy is kind of what everybody's talking about. Um, I would more comp Fire to the Stars to the YA staples like Aragon and especially Ranger's Apprentice. What would you define the genre of for this story? Do you agree with me? Am I fully off base here?
It actually somewhat surprised me that you said that, but only because I agree with you and I seemed to be the odd man out on that. I didn't have a problem with it being marketed as romantasy, but I think that because it's such a marketing term nowadays, it kind of gets like it becomes the label for like this gradient, I guess is the way I would put it. And anything on this gradient is just like if there's romance in it, just like throw it on the gradient. And I think in a weird way, it has like if we're gonna lose the technicality of it, it almost becomes like a way to guarantee that there's a romance, a healthy romance in the fantasy, as opposed to just like a fantasy book with no romance, right? So I think that, for purely marketing terms, I think it doesn't dissatisfy the romantasy reader by any means, but I do think that you're right. I think it has a bit of a larger scope in terms of the uh I guess the different types of conflicts that you would find in more of a fantasy leaning novel. And it's actually funny that you mentioned Aragon. Are you aware that my editor also acquired Aragon?
I did not.
Yeah,
Whoa.
you I feel like there's like some synergy or osmosis or something that you sensed from that. I feel like she has kind of like a brand and my agent like nailed it with her.
Yeah, that's wow, that makes so much more sense knowing that because the fantasy really does read and the story like Aragon also has a romance in it, right? And
Mhm.
Fire to the Stars has a romance in the story, a beautiful romance.
Oh, thank you.
But the thing that really stuck out to me for the comp is, as everybody's kind of aware, YA is kind of a really tough space for male readers.
Mhm.
Young teenage boys kind of get lost in that shuffle. And from the first, I want to say, a chapter and a half, I got on our panel call and I was like, guys, this is a fantasy book for boy readers. Like, they're going to
Really?
pick this up. Yeah.
Wow. That's such an interesting take. I think romantasy gets they just assume that there's like the female audience and like they just shove it there and anything after that is just like a happy coincidence. But I'd never heard that before, and I'm so glad that you said that because now that you say it, like I did in writing Abel's point of view, I did find it somewhat inspired by like my anime and manga background because one thing from those stories that I find to be very well done is those stories tend to write really great vulnerable boys and that have like a full range of human emotion. They don't have to be like this super strong person all the time. They can have the tragic backstory and they can make vulnerable choices and be emotional in front of other people, and that's a strength. So that did feed my experience in writing a boy. And you know, because I always have that thought of like, oh, I don't want to like feminize him too much because like I think that people will like not that that's a bad thing. I just think that there's a voice blending element to it, like the voice differentiation and in doing dual POV. Like I think that there was a level of almost patriarchal programming that I felt a little bit of an obligation to put into his point of view, just to allow the emotional arc to feel like more of a deconstruction of what he'd been
Mm.
raised on.
I can really see that. And I think Abel's point of views, I think, were my favorite part of the story. I mean, Claire as well is a brilliant narrator. And I think that even her point of views are really um, appealing to a male voice as well. I think that she's got that conniving roguishness that's very Six of Crows esque,
Mm.
where I think it really captures all readers, which I was really thrilled about. Speaking of Abel, my boy, my beloved, the child of despair. You hurt my feelings. His journal entries
Oh,
hurt my feelings.
great. Sorry, question
In like
mark.
the but like in the best way possible, where he just his despair, his journey that he goes on, that deconstruction a little bit of kind of what he thought he knew, into the man that he becomes, I think really came across strong, and I can see that determination and his love and all of that
Mhm.
through his journals specifically, not just his POVs. What was like writing his journals? Where was that in your process? What was that like? You just captured such a different voice for him.
Yeah, so he was interesting, the journal entries in particular, because those actually came to me first. I knew what who the characters were going to be, but I knew that this backstory was going to be such a key element to that first, I guess, crack in the total faith in the system that Abel has, or at least started with in his backstory. And so and it's interesting that they read really emotional for you because for me they felt very clinical. Because he is so analytical, and I was very careful about, at least in the early entries, about making it factual and having that sort of very blunt observational, this is what I'm seeing, these are the conclusions I'm drawing. But there's in those points, I went back and made like I would make word choice tweaks that were more emotionally charged. So it would kind of tell on him a little bit. And then as uh you got the or like you read it physically, right? You said you got the
Yeah.
manuscript. Did you get the formatted version?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I have
Um,
both. I have an early manuscript, and then I got the one of the finished arcs as well. And then I have since picked up the finished copy. So I did
got
get to
it.
see the formatting.
Okay. So you saw the blood smears that they put
Yeah.
on the journal entries. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Horrifying. Devastating.
it's yeah, so that I actually argued for that. That was my idea because I have this big thing about paratext and what is left unsaid on the page. And I knew that if I got too like too obvious and too expressive with him, that would almost read dishonest. And not true to character to him because he's trying so hard to cling to facts and to find logic in it that I wanted those blood smears to just like gradually get worse and worse and worse. And then there's like those few teardrops on the last page. And I almost feel
Yeah, the
sad for
teardrops.
audiobook readers because like I feel like audiobook readers are probably not going to have as much sympathy for him because I always wonder like how much heavy lifting are those blood smears doing? And that's why I argued for them because I thought that they would help build a little bit more sympathy because, those journal entries like they're rough. Like they're rough to read because it's such a dark route to go down for him and I don't think that I knew writing them that they were going to be controversial, that he was going to lose some people in that, but I think that like that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
Is that when we're trying to help somebody or trying to resist a very tragic circumstance, we are capable of doing some really horrifying things. Um, and the justifications that we tell ourselves, like sometimes they like it gets bad, like, to put it mildly. And I think that as I was writing the entries and it was getting progressively darker, I just had a moment where I was like, I really have to commit to what he's doing. Otherwise, I feel like this is a very dishonest redemption arc. Like what is the redemption arc if it's like not that bad for what this world is capable of doing to people? Yeah, it was just a really interesting marriage between that like analytical brain and like what is being experienced in him like turmoil wise.
Yeah.
So
And I think that really does come across. Like they read so the clinicalness, I do read that and it detached. And I love that you fought for the blood spears in that paratext because I think that his detachment reads as pure deranged love almost. Like he's so sure that if he approaches this clinically,
yeah,
there's nothing that he's correct. All of this is right. Everything he's doing is right.
yeah,
And the more deranged he gets and those blood spears and the teardrops, it's like the clinicalness, you can see that he's breaking at the seams. And I think
yeah.
that breakage that we read in his journal entries then colors a lot of his POVs current day that we are reading,
Mhm.
and the trauma that he's walking around with. It
Yeah.
just, oh, devastating, beautiful, brilliant. I
Oh,
don't
thank you.
knowing that you wrote those first, like I want to go back and reread the book just to
Oh, that's
read it
awesome.
with that context.
Yeah,
Um,
it fueled. I think once I had that down, I'm not sure the rest of it would have come together the same way had I not done that first, which I'm very grateful that I coincidentally did that. Made
yeah,
it
no,
easier to
that's
write
great. I
him.
love that. I love him so much. Talking about, some of the character people, I want to shift a little bit over to another character, which is the setting of the book.
Yeah.
This book is vaguely French inspired. Am I wrong in saying that?
Oh no, you're 100% correct. Like,
Okay.
yeah, so I would say that came from interestingly Marie Antoinette and learning that like growing up we hear that let them eat cake and we think that she's like such an evil person who doesn't give a crap about like the poor people and like so when I learned that she really just was like kind of this ignorant person who just didn't really know any better and was just existing in this bubble of like, la-di-da, cool, we got fashion, we got the jewels, but so many things that were attributed to her are not real and or were the result of the greed of the people around her. And so when I locked into that, I always had that when I that locked into my brain as like a piece of inspiration that I just kind of filed away for a future story. And when I started thinking about like writing like a hunter and hunted romance, which was like one of my favorite tropes, and I was like, okay, there's not a lot of dragons with this particular trope, at least in YA at the time. And then I thought about it a little bit further and I was like, well, I can make it even less like other things by making the shifting involuntary. And then I was like, okay, but why? And then I thought about, like the whole trope of like dragons on a pile of gold. And then that's when
Yeah.
I brought in like the Marie Antoinette stuff because I was like, oh my gosh, if people are trying to like kill these dragons, it would totally be like a the exact type of like scapegoating narrative that Marie Antoinette the history kind of created. And so I did a deep dive into like 18th century France and the culture on the ground, which like there's a surprising lack of literature on that. But I was able to get a good amount lot and find this like awareness towards the takers of society. And
Mhm.
I thought that cultural like mood was really interesting. And it was also very interesting with all the execution because it kind of had this vibe of like, people will gravitate towards simple solutions if it means their anxiety and fear is resolved sooner, even if it's not the right choice. It's just if they stick a band-aid on it, they feel better for the time being, as opposed to taking steps to make sure that that fear doesn't come back in the future, even if in the short term, it makes you question everything and you have to dive deep into um, some really intense problem solving where it might seem hopeless. But yeah, so that's where the French came from. And then I just really love the idea of having like that, like the classic like dragon story in a European country. So it all seemed to kind of coalesce very well.
Yeah, I love that. The Marie Antoinette of it all, like being your kind of central thread, is fascinating. And it really reads like so 18th century France. Now that you're saying that, like it really does. And it's upsetting because so much of what you just talked about, I think, applies to modern day mythologies
Yeah,
and modern day problem solving and modern day mythos that we're building around people who are different. And it's upsetting how much overlap there is there, which I think
yeah,
makes it a good read for a YA reader because they need, teenagers need to see the stories that are happening around them contextualized, maybe
yeah,
not exactly as it's happening, but they're smart enough to pick up those threads and they might see this what happens when, a um a religion mandates what people do, a mythos mandates what people do. I think
mhm,
that fear mongering, if they see it in this setting, I mean, it really is something we talked about on the panel a lot,
yeah,
is how fear mongering works in a society and in a community. And I think you
yeah,
really wrote that. And that's, I think, what those shifter stories do best is like
yeah,
show that involuntariness that people who are different don't really get a say. Uh,
yeah.
this is
That in that
so interesting.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, the scapegoating in particular, just to go back to that thing with Abel with like I wanted to write like an honest redemption story and I had to get him to a really dark and very debatable place to do that, right? But he was just the one half of the equation. So I wanted to have one person who was the scapegoat and the scapegoatee, I guess.
Mm,
And so I thought it was really important to show somebody who enables the system and another person who suffers from it, and to see the things that they see on either side can form a completely different picture. And also there's that element of just because you think you did research, don't think you know everything either. because you never know what other pieces of information could completely change what you think you know.
Even if you did a whole bunch of research, what is the validity of the research you're looking at? Where does
Yeah.
that come from? I think you wrote that really well as we're learning about the other slayers and the resources they're working off of. Some of them are, archaic, some of them are outdated, and people take that as, oh, we did our research, but what is the validity of that research? And I think that all comes back around, we'll get there in a second, but the ending of the book and how that idea that everything we know is actually wrong and everybody that did all this
Mhm.
fact checking still got it wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, that ended up being one of my favorite parts of the book, because there were so many points in which the characters thought they understood the situation, and it didn't coalesce until they had like they'd been drained emotionally and had gone through, um, essentially been forced to go through everything the hard way, and they chose not to stop even though they were tired, and devastated, and didn't see a light at the end of the tunnel. So that's the other reason why I thought it was really important to make sure that I was writing an honest story about what this world was capable of doing to a person on the scapegoat side as well. And without spoiling it, I fought for the core of Claire's perspective as well. I was there was a little bit of debate there, but I thought that that was a very important piece to keep as well. I'll keep that under lock and key.
Yeah, no spoilers, but I couldn't agree more. And I remember reading that whole scene, and listeners, like, I need you to read this book because I want to talk to people about it. Um, but I think it's one of those moments where if a book club was reading this, or if a teenager would pick this up and they're reading it with their friend, they would text their friends immediately and be like, "Oh my gosh, did you get to this point? What do
Yeah.
you think? Who's right? Like, how how do you reconcile with this?"
Hmm.
I think Claire's point of view there really brings it home and brings it all full circle.
Hmm.
And I hope teenagers get to have that experience, that they can talk to each other about this book and
Yeah.
be able to be like, "What do you think?" 'Cause there's a lot of like there are those conversations around, government control of knowledge, how
Hmm.
our mythos is handed down, who's right, who's wrong, who do we
Hmm.
scapegoat? Um, that would make really interesting conversation pieces.
Yeah, and I think too there's there's an element of the people we love, or under what circumstances are we willing to love people, and um the realization in some circumstances that it might be conditional. And it's interesting that you bring it up as a conversation piece, because that's what I wrote it for. And I knew, just going into publishing and doing all the research, I knew that you were never going to, or I was never going to satisfy everybody. But what I could do is make it something interesting to talk about, even if talking about it is bashing on it. And so I actually had this thought where I was like, everybody talks about writing for your ideal reader, but I'm going to write for my ideal hater too, because I
Oh, I
wanted.
love that.
I literally had a sheet of paper with two columns, and I was like, I want them to hate it for this reason. I want them to hate it for this reason. It's like I wanted the characters to be polarizing, because what is there to talk about if there's not a difference of opinion? And I think that the themes and particularly the social dynamics that the dragon shifting, I guess, allegory plays with. I think it's important to talk about who was right and who was wrong, because that really makes you think about, like you said, contextualizing and bringing those thoughts into real life, and seeing the dynamics around teenagers, seeing the dynamics around them, um, uh, kind of, I guess, reflected in a book. It I wrote it so that it would upset a certain type of person, but also so that it would validate a certain type of person. And I don't have that in like a I would say a certain type of person within their healing journey, because
Mm,
we've all got something to heal. So I didn't write it to like piss anybody off. Like I'm not pointing at any specific like, person with a belief system or anything like that. But it is meant to be almost like a forced catharsis onto the reader,
I
whether
feel
they
that.
want it or not.
No, I really, really feel that. I think having read this in the spring, there was a lot of stuff going on in the world. I mean, there's been a lot of stuff going on in the world, but it I felt catharsis having finished that book. Like it did help me process something. Um,
I'm
because our
so glad to
characters
hear
go
that.
through so much. Like they just and not just them, like society went through so much. This had been years and decades and like systems in place and the book ends, with that system overturning and like a new leaf is starting
Hmm.
and rebuilding gets to happen.
Hmm.
And it left me with just a satisfaction that a book hadn't left me with in a while, where I was like, the journey is complete. And actually, when there's hope when we push back on systems, and there's hope for people that have done bad. There's hope for when you've gone through trauma, when you thought you had nothing left. Like there's a new
Yeah.
day coming, and actually, the community gets to build that together.
Yeah.
It really, I closed the book and was like, ah, wow, that was great. Like, it just
Oh,
made
thank
me feel
you.
better after going through so much sadness.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that helped. I think for me too, it was also the type of story that was like I had to dig deep into some, things I didn't want to face, but like at the end of the day, in processing things emotionally, like there is almost a the only way out is through type feeling to it. And so that's for me what shaped a lot of the story was this like how do you get somebody to recognize the wrong that they've done, and how do you get somebody to recognize that the place they've been socially driven to is not the end.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that kind of answers my final question, but if you want to elaborate any more, but who
Mhm.
is the reader that you hope finds this book? You want them coming away with that catharsis, but
Mhm.
who is your ideal reader? What else are they reading? What are they listening to? What are they watching? What do they need when they pick up this book?
uh Somebody who needs a good cry but wants to feel happy about it.
Agreed.
Like I think it's real simple like that. It's somebody who wants to feel.
Perfect. That is, agree wholeheartedly. This book will make you feel, and it will feel good, feel bad, feel all of it. And I think that we need more books like that where we feel all of it.
Thank
Wow.
you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Morgan, for writing this. Again, our Indies Introduced panel had a blast, and we were so glad that it made the list. So thank you. Thank you for putting this in the world. Congratulations on your debut.
Thank you so much, and thank you for believing in it. That I'm so glad that it has resonated with you on that level.
Yeah, it's amazing. Thank you for this conversation. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You as well.
Thank you for listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA site at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!